everybody. Know we're having fun and visiting and had to wait a few minutes for the room to turn over. Before you leave, you might want to check your drawers in your desk and under your chairs there. The Senate was in here with appropriation. They may have some money laying around, so you might want to check before you leave and see if we find any. Yes, sir. We're going to call our meeting to order and ask Chairman Linson if he would open us with a word of prayer, please.
If you would, bow with me, please. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love and your goodness to us, for watching over us and caring for us, and for all the many blessings that you've seen fit to send our way. We thank you for the opportunity that you've given to each of us who serve here to represent the people that sent us here. We just ask, Lord, that you would give us your wisdom, your guidance, and your direction as we seek to do those things that are in the best interest of our state. We just ask that you would use us to be vessels of your will and help us to do all that pleases you. For we pray it in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, I want to call on Chairman Martin for an announcement, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I want to ask the committee if they'll join me in welcoming Ms. Singleton and a group from King's Academy that are on the wall in the back there through the Capitol today. They're down here. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to have y'all visit with us today. Hope you have a good day. Got one little piece of housekeeping we'd like to do before we get started. I'd like to have a motion to send Senate Bill 5 back to committee.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. It's back in the committee. Okay. All right. Now we're going to hear from anybody who wants to make a request today, and some of the requests that they make may not be on your sheets. Some 16 bills, I think, came out yesterday from committees, but they won't be on our sheets until they're reported back, this morning when the clerk reads the report. But if anybody's here and they want to ask, we want to go ahead and take care of that and let them come and ask us one time and do that. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. Senator?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I've got two bills on the blue sheet for your consideration today. On the first page, I have Senate Bill 1, which started as the Fair and Safe Athletic Opportunities Act, and we have worked with Chairman Bonner and Chairman Irwin to merge your female sports bill that came out of the House with Senate Bill 1. It has been renamed the Riley-Gaines Act, as originated here in the House. We've incorporated a number of other House elements into this bill, specifically a couple issues having to deal with dressing rooms and some carve-outs for coaches and athletic trainers that the House had included. And the other most significant change in this bill is we have made this exclusively a sports bill. As you probably recall, the Riley-Gaines Act in the House touched a number of different code sections, replacing the word gender with sex. And we have taken those changes out in Senate Bill 1, and Senate Bill 1 exists currently exclusively as a sports bill. Happy to answer any questions on that one, Mr. Chairman, or I can tell you about Senate Bill 140.
Okay, Senator, thank you. We do have a question. Whip Park has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Dolezal, is it not true that there is not a single publicly confirmed instance of a transgender student in public high school sports in the state of Georgia?
Good morning, Whip. Thank you for that question. That is true. Due to the good work of Representative Will Wade and Governor Kemp a few years ago, we allowed the Georgia High School Association to make this decision by rule. And so they have made it such by rule that males are only allowed to participate in male sports and females participate in female sports. What we are doing here is two things. One, we're codifying that for K through 12 in the code, and we're also expanding that to intercollegiate collegiate sports as well. Because as you know, here in the state, we did have an incident that's become quite famous, perhaps the case that is the most famous as it relates to this issue. And so that did take place right here in Georgia, and we're looking to this law would address that.
And one additional question, if I may. Is it not true that this legislation opens up all of our public schools to litigation for, again, an issue that's already been addressed?
Mr. Whip, there is a private right of action in this bill. There is a complaint process currently in Georgia law that we rolled this up into. That is a different change. I didn't highlight it, but thank you for bringing that up. The House bill address this through the Professional Standards Commission. The Senate bill uses the existing complaint process that already exists in public schools to have the adjudication for any complaint that would arise in this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator, don't see any other questions. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I also have Senate Bill 140, which is a bill that's very important to the optometrists. It's on the top of page 3. This would allow doctors of optometry to dispense and sell drugs that they have the right to prescribe currently under law. This is a good bill for patient access to those drugs. They're not always readily available in a pharmacy.
Okay. Don't see any questions.
Thank you,
sir.
Chairman.
Yes, sir, Senator.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Just came back. Senate Bill 56, State Indemnification Fund for fallen law enforcement officers. This bill has already been funded in the amended budget we just passed a few weeks ago. And Senate Bill 105, veterinarian telehealth bill.
You've already asked for that, have
Yep.
you not? Yeah.
Just want to come visit you.
Great. Just want to remind you, one and you're done. You don't have to come
Thank you.
back, but we're glad to have you
Well, Mr.
visit.
Chairman, I love
anytime.
you so much. I'm here again. So.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. This? That's right. Okay. Senator? Yes, sir.
Morning, Chairman, Committee. I'm here to present Senate Bill 212. It's at the bottom of page 3. This is the Protecting the Information of Minors in Public Schools bill. During this last campaign cycle, there were numerous instances of political campaigns and politicians masking as alternate reasons to be in schools, and they were actually harvesting data of minors and then feeding that information directly to campaigns. This simply protects the information of students from campaigns illicitly, falsely presenting themselves as something they are not. Fraudulently organized is the key word on line 93 of the bill. So any of us are still welcome and invited to come into schools to be able to do voter registrations as long as it's by invitation of administration and not under any sort of a false banner. Happy to answer any questions.
Have a couple of questions for Leader Hughley. You have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to be clear, you're not suggesting that national organizations such as Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority or Delta Sigma Theta Sorority would be banned from doing their traditional voter registration for seniors. It's something they've done for years and years and years. These are not political organizations, but they do ask to come in. They're not necessarily invited. So you're saying if they're not invited by their schools, they cannot do that? Is that your intent?
No. And in fact, I refer you to lines 42 through 55 of the bill. That was an amendment offered by Leader Harold Jones and Senator Kim Jackson to clarify that exact question. We wanted to make it perfectly clear that organizations that were representing themselves as such would be able to continue to do that, or that you could even be free to discuss politics at a Friday night football game. What you can't do is AKA couldn't come in and then say that they were there for a Girl Scout cookie drive and then get kids' contact information and push it out to campaigns. Very different.
Okay. Whip Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, is it not true that there already exists federal law that provides extensive protections regarding student information and the prohibition on disclosure of their information? So you're not alleging that that federal law was violated, were you?
No, I'm not alleging anything. FERPA that you're referring to does prevent the schools from distributing that information. But what happened in the 1st, 4th, and 5th largest counties in Georgia, some of which we share, schools that we share, candidates were going in under the pretense of doing something completely different and then giving that information to campaigns. This is just preventing that from ever happening again.
Well, last question. Will this bill in any way, again, I think my concerns is that it would disincentivize students from engaging in the political process. I think at least my reading of it is that, again, it's going in the wrong direction, which I would otherwise want to see, of trying to empower and educate students to lean in as opposed to being scared of violating state law.
No, this doesn't do anything to students at all. This keeps us, the elected officials, or those that are seeking political office, from doing something to be able to harvest child's data and then passing it on to campaigns in a very illicit way.
Representative Evans?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author, I believe in protecting student information, so I don't have any problem with that. I do think there are federal rules that apply for it, but my concern is there are high schools in this state that have young Republican clubs, they have young Democrat clubs, and I'm concerned that the language starting on line 92 is going to sort of open them up to questions, because I'm hoping, and this is a question to you, I assume, and you can let me know if I'm wrong, that you're not trying to stop students from organizing themselves if they want to talk about candidates, but since we've got this line 92 that says no candidate shall solicit any individual to fraudulently organize, aren't we opening up those students who, for their own reasons, because they've read something about a candidate and they want to talk about it at a young Democrat club or a young Republican club, we're opening them up to questioning such that we might quash their enthusiasm for making their voices heard through these clubs, which I would hope you would not want to stop. So if you could speak to any of that, I would appreciate it.
No, it's a great question. So, line 92, no candidate, campaign committee, or political action committee shall solicit an individual. That's very different than a club, young Democrats, young Republicans, or anything in between, inviting candidates to be able to come in. Administration has allowed them entry, just as any of us. If you go to visit a school, you're coming in there, you're identifying who you are and what you're doing. This is very specific to a situation where candidates were going in, setting up fake voter registration drives in school systems with the premise that they were coaching students, minors, to set up voter registration drives that were never registered or coordinated with the Secretary of State to actually pass that data on to the State Election Board to register them to vote.
Was there any consideration given to safeguards, though, that aren't going to subject students who do organize events on their own to interrogation from the opposite candidate to say, didn't this person ask you to do that? Just calling them in to be subject to extra questioning that those of us over 18 wouldn't be subject to if we were holding events. That's what I'm concerned about.
I don't think the word interrogation exists anywhere in this bill.
It doesn't. I'm asking, if you set up a framework that you've got on 92 where we're saying a campaign can't solicit a student.
To fraudulently
Let me finish
organize.
if you'd let me finish my question, I've let you finish your answer. So if the student organizes their own event for candidate A, candidate B is thinking, oh, I bet candidate A put them up to it, and then we've got an interrogation process. We've likely incentivized that process to the student. That's what I'm concerned about, because how are you going to find out about this fraud that the student was induced or whatever from this other candidate? There's no other way to do it except to ask the student. That's what I'm concerned about. Did y'all think about that?
We did. And if you look at the very next line, because you're taking the sentence out of context, individual under the age of 18 to fraudulently organize an event on the property of any local school system when the purpose of such event is influencing the nomination for election or election of any person for office. I think that answers it pretty plainly.
But you do acknowledge that you're saying that right now a student, even under your bill, if it passed, you wouldn't have any problem with a student or a group of students on their own through a young Democrat club or a young Republican club talking about and supporting a particular candidate.
That's free speech, and they should be encouraged to do so.
Right, and so how are we going to know the difference between when that's happening and when they're being pushed by a candidate to do it if we don't allow someone to ask those students why they're doing it and how they came to do it, and which would potentially chill them from wanting to have these kind of events, which I don't think we would want to do. That's what I'm concerned about.
Representative, respectfully, I disagree with your premise on it, and I think that you're trying to infer something that's not in the bill.
Thank you. We disagree.
Okay. Representative Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in your long answers, you kind of answered me. I was concerned because every newborn baby in my district, when they come into the world, they get a Vote Al Williams sticker to take home.
As they should.
Okay. Chairman Martin?
Just real briefly, isn't it true what you're after is a campaign young Republicans, young Democrats can still meet on campus if they do it according to school policies. Isn't it true now that most schools have policies, they don't even allow a campaign sign into a sporting event
That's
for a
100%
particular
true.
candidate?
That's a great point. Thank you,
Isn't that
Chairman.
already the case?
Yes, it is.
That's their
And
policy.
That will continue. And that will continue. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, was there another question here? You've waved, okay, good. All right, no more questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all.
Okay. Senator Hatchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Senate Bill 40 is a secondary metal recyclers cleanup bill that we need to change some definitions around, and we're removing a sunset on a cash provision. I've got Senate Bill 148, which allows the Department of Education to initiate a pilot program for outdoor education space. And then I've already asked for 141, so I won't ask again, but 141.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Don't see any. Thank you,
Thank
Senator.
you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Representative Cox, what you got?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's on the yellow sheet, page 5. It's HR 347. It's about the 5th or 6th one from the bottom. This is an urging resolution for Georgia high schools to start girls flag football, and it has gotten incredible support across the state. Since we dropped the resolution, 34 additional teams have already signed up, and that is the gist of this resolution.
Okay. Don't see any questions for you. Thank you, sir. Senator Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 36, passed yesterday in committee, will be available after its reading today. It's a bill that takes the same protections for people of faith from unfair federal government action and applies it to the state and local level. That's what it does. Glad to take questions.
Okay. Got a question for you. Whip Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Setzler, is it not true that there's a very large distinction between what exists at the federal level and if this bill moves forward, in that this legislation would serve blatantly as a license to discriminate because there are no state-level civil rights protections? Is that not true?
Well, you're welcome for having an opportunity to kind of make that talking point. The fact is, this does not do that. What this does is it takes the center road. There are some states that preempt local non-discrimination ordinances. This bill specifically does not do that. This bill takes the center road, it leaves those in place, and simply provides protection for folks who currently, there's a hole in the laws, as you well know, that federal civil rights law applies in every circumstance except with respect to individual free exercise, with respect to state and local governments. This bill simply patches that hole.
Senator, I appreciate that talking point, which I disagree with, but is it not true that based on the facts of where we've seen this legislation implemented in other states, it's resulted in broad-based discrimination against marginalized communities, against vulnerable communities, and it's resulted in a lot of chaos with respect to public safety laws and other generally applicable neutral laws? Is that not true?
To the gentleman's question, I would love this committee to have the time. It does not have to go case by case by case by case. There's not a single case of that you can point to by state-level RFRA in the country. In fact, we were very careful working with the governor's team to pass the exact same language that exists in federal law that's been proven for 32 years, that we would ask for nothing more and nothing less. Appreciate the question.
Representative Miller has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author, Mr. Senator, as I understand it, there was offered in the committee process an amendment that would include anti-discriminatory language. Did you support that amendment?
Yeah. What that amendment was seeking to do was a Trojan horse of an amendment. What it would do is it would completely invalidate any claim of religious exercise against some allegation of discrimination. What this bill does, actually, it's intended to recognize these circumstances. If there's a claim of discrimination, there's a claim of someone's religious rights. It balances those circumstances. To suggest that it's going to be not usable if there's some allegation of discrimination is to make this a one-sided question that deals with exemptions. All we're seeking to do is, in those very difficult circumstances, recognize those governmental interests that would that would prohibit discrimination and balance those against someone's religious claim. We've seen time and again, in fact, the Hosanna Tabor Lutheran case at the U.S. Supreme Court, the same question was raised. In a 9-0 Supreme Court opinion, where Justice Kagan actually joined Justice Alito, said the idea that a 1964 Civil Rights Act claim can operate without any balance to someone's religious rights is nonsense. Even at the federal level, there's a balancing test. All this bill does is create a balancing test. It's not the exemption you're talking about, and those that propose that are mischaracterizing this as an exemption bill. This is not an exemption bill. It simply gives the proper weight to people's exercise of faith.
Okay, well, I just will respectfully disagree with your characterization. My second question is, we have First Amendment protections already in place for religious freedom and to protect religious freedom in this country that are as old as this country is. I'm trying to understand why all of a sudden is that not enough?
Great question. We have full federal protections for freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of press. But in 1997, when the Supreme Court ruled in the Bernie v. Flores case, protection for free exercise with respect to impacts by state and local governments are not protected by our federal Constitution. That is an indisputable fact, and that's the reason we have this. This is the hole in law that only with respect to free exercise in relation to state and local government is there not federal protections. That's why states specifically have to patch this hole. 39 states have done it. We're one of the 11 that have not, and that's why we have it before you.
Thank you. Thank you to the speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to looking at that case and, if appropriate, responding in a different form.
Thank you. Bernie v. Flores, 1997.
I'll find it.
Leader Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the senator, this is not the first rodeo with this, so tell me what has happened in Georgia since 2016 that necessitates that we do this now. Cool. Give me some examples of,
Sure.
of what we're fixing.
Fortunately, in 2018, we had an election where Governor Brian Kemp won by 55,000 votes. When COVID came along, and you look around other states, you look at California in particular, you had a California governor that said people of faith could not sing in their churches because the expelling of vapor from their mouths created too much of a risk of COVID, even if they were socially distanced. You had people of faith in California, for example, who couldn't gather in churchyards. You had people in Mississippi, churches predominantly of color, who couldn't gather in their cars together as a body because local governments tried to shut them down from sitting in their cars to be together as a church body. Fortunately, in Georgia, we had a governor that didn't shut our state down, but we saw during COVID that other states, there were significant impacts on people's basic religious rights. Thankfully, we didn't have those in Georgia, and we're trying to prevent that from happening proactively by putting something in place to other states where religious protections were protected. Didn't see these kind of violations. But other non-RFRA states we saw with executives who were indifferent to people's basic rights, there were big violations, and we're seeking to prevent that.
To the speaker, let me just say that if we're going to talk about COVID, we got to talk about how many people who died because they didn't abide by the rules that were put in place, and they died from singing in the choir right next to somebody else. They died from sitting in the pews. So let's just not go there.
Okay. Representative Evans, did you have a question? Wait. Okay. Don't see any other questions, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there any requests from committee members? Okay, I don't see any. This morning we were just going to do hearings only to have any requests. There'll be more coming out when the clerk makes his report today, and we'll have that. But for the members, if you would please see Ms. Lewis. She has something for each of you. Just no rush about it, but just when you have time. She's over here now if you want to see her, but whatever. If you would please see her. Thank you, and we're adjourned.